For years, Ethan had lived two lives, carefully balancing them like a tightrope walker above a chasm of secrets. In one life, he was Ethan Davis, a devoted, reliable friend to Jack, a childhood bond that had carried them through every major milestone. Jack was the kind of friend you could call at 2 a.m. with a crisis, the one who knew your every fault and loved you just the same. Ethan had grown up with Jack, shared every triumph and heartbreak with him, and had become inseparable. But there was another life, another world, equally as real but entirely separate. In that life, Ethan was Alex. He had created the identity by accident years ago when he met Laura. Laura was a different kind of friend, adventurous, spontaneous, full of energy and reckless joy. She didn't know about Jack, and Jack didn't know about her. Alex, as she knew him, was the fun, carefree side of Ethan he rarely showed anyone else. The person who didn't carry the weight of expectation or the baggage of the past. With Laura, he could reinvent himself, be someone new. At first, it had all been innocent. Ethan hadn't intended to deceive either of them. The split just happened naturally. Jack and Laura came from completely different worlds. Jack was practical and grounded, while Laura was wild and free-spirited. Ethan felt like two different people with them, each friendship fulfilling something in him that the other couldn't. For a while, he convinced himself it was harmless. What was the harm in having two best friends, each in their own orbit? But then things started to spiral. As time passed, the weight of maintaining two lives began to take its toll. There were too many close calls. Too many lies layered on top of one another to keep the worlds from colliding. Ethan became an expert at compartmentalizing, always careful not to let his time with Jack overlap with his time with Laura. But living like this, living as two different people, was exhausting. The constant anxiety of being found out gnawed at him, but he told himself he could manage it. He had to, until the day everything came crashing down. Ethan still didn't know how they had found out about each other. One moment his two lives were separate, safe, and then the next they weren't. Jack and Laura had met, by chance or maybe by fate, and when they realized the deception, both of them had been furious. The confrontation had been brutal. Ethan had come home to find Jack sitting in his living room, the look of betrayal clear on his face. Before he could say anything, Laura had walked in right behind him. The moment their eyes met, Ethan knew there was no way out. His two lives had collided, and the truth was about to unravel in ways he couldn't control. "You have to be kidding me," Jack had said, his voice cold and filled with anger. "All these years, Ethan. I thought we were best friends. You've been living this entire other life, pretending to be someone else." With her, Laura's eyes were just as hurt, though her anger burned differently, hotter, more immediate. "How could you do this? You've been lying to both of us. Were we just some kind of game to you?" Ethan stood there, frozen, the guilt and shame washing over him. He tried to explain, tried to tell them that it wasn't a game, that he hadn't meant to deceive them. But how could he justify years of lies? The truth was, he had been selfish, unwilling to give up either of them, terrified of losing the parts of himself he had found with each. In the end, they had given him an ultimatum. Jack and Laura, both devastated by the betrayal, demanded that Ethan choose. He couldn't keep both friendships. They wouldn't let him live two lives anymore. He had to decide which one he wanted to keep, and which one he was willing to lose forever. Ethan had begged them to understand, to give him a chance to make things right, but their pain was too raw. There was no going back. He had built his life on lies, and now the truth was tearing it apart. For days, Ethan wrestled with the decision. How could he choose between two people who meant the world to him? Jack had been there since the beginning, the friend who had seen him through everything. But Laura had become his escape, the person who allowed him to feel free, to be someone new. Choosing one meant losing the other forever, and the thought of that was unbearable. In the end, Ethan made the hardest decision of his life. He chose Jack. The history they shared, the loyalty Jack had shown him over the years, was something Ethan couldn't walk away from. He knew it would take time, years maybe, for Jack to fully trust him again. But he couldn't let go of the person who had been by his side through every hardship and triumph. When Ethan told Laura, the look in her eyes nearly broke him. She didn't scream or cry. She just looked at him, her expression a mixture of hurt and disbelief. "I thought we were something real," she said quietly, her voice trembling. "I thought I knew you." "You did," Ethan had whispered, his heart shattering. "You did know me, but I can't lose Jack." Laura nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "You already lost me." She left without another word, and just like that, the part of Ethan's life that had been Alex was gone. Laura disappeared from his world, and Ethan knew he would never see her again. The pain of that decision lingered for years. Jack eventually forgave him, slowly, painfully, but he forgave him. Their friendship survived, though it was never the same. There was always a shadow hanging over them, a reminder of the betrayal that had once torn their bond apart. As for Laura, she became a ghost in Ethan's memories, a reminder of the life he could have had, the person he could have been if he hadn't tried to live two lives. He thought about her often, wondering where she was, if she had found happiness, if she had forgiven him in her own way. But he never reached out. He knew that chapter of his life was closed, and trying to reopen it would only bring more pain. Now, years later, as Ethan sat alone, he thought about the lives he had lived, the choices he had made, and the people he had lost along the way. He had tried to have it all, two lives, two friends, two identities, but in the end, he had lost part of himself in the process. He had chosen Jack, but in doing so, he had left a piece of his heart with Laura, a piece that he would never get back.